Photos in this second video feature the refining and sale of Micmac gasoline and the production and distribution of natural gas. This filling station, located at the southwest corner of Route 114 and the Dawson Settlement Road, operated by Claude and Alonzo Fales, ran from 1939 until the mid-1940s. This lady is standing beside the Micmac filling station located near the Staples store. A resident of the area took this picture of a family member. Harold had a stationary engineer's license and took over the refinery from Edmund Steeves. In his spare time, he delivered gasoline to filling stations located in Weldon and Moncton. The period pump with a glass bowl, installed in 1937, was used to fill service vehicles on the oil field. Gasoline had no additives and would ping if you had a heavy foot. Lead additives could only be purchased if production topped 1 million barrels. Initially, the refinery was required to remove volatile light distillates so that the remaining heavy fuel could be burned locally. Gasoline production started in 1931, continuing until 1988. What was not used on the station was shipped to the Esso refinery in Dartmouth. This photo of Harold Osmond Toole was taken 3.5 months before his 100th birthday. Harold worked on the oil fields from 1930 until 1941. During the war, St. John's Port got his attention, after which he had a career with the Department of Transport, managing airports in Moncton and Sydney, Nova Scotia. He retired in 1974 as planning manager for the Atlantic region. His photos and memories of life working on the oil fields are a valuable part of its history. In the refinery, crude oil from the large 6,000-barrel storage tank in the background was heated in a still before entering the fractioning tower on the left. Volatile lighter gas came off the top and was directed to underground storage tanks seen in the foreground to cool. Heavy oil came out the bottom and was diverted to nearby above-ground tanks. More refinery pictures will be seen in Part 3. The telephone number of the New Brunswick Gas and Oilfields filling station on Main Street was 5096. Obviously, it did not provide full service. The Moncton filling station was first listed in January 1940. Listing ceased in July 1942. As a matter of interest, the number of Renton service station in Louisville was 6298. 3 telephone numbers with the prefix 18 could connect you with operations in Albert County. Nathan Steeves of Salem paid $11.48 for a barrel of gas containing 45 imperial gallons. The cost of gasoline is 17.5 cents a gallon plus 8 cents a gallon tax, equaling 25.5 cents a gallon, or 5.6 cents a liter. Drum number 28 was to be returned. Nathan later ran a service station in Hillsborough for 15 years. His son Gordon continued the business. This nighttime photo was taken by Dr. Henderson of gas discharging from well number 5. This was the first big gas strike. The euphoria of this momentous event could only be properly celebrated by a spectacular tower of flame illuminating the night sky. This well was abandoned almost 100 years later in 2008. The remaining pictures in this video deal with natural gas. A pipeline was quickly run to this house, which was only a kilometer away. After some amateurish connections, gas would illuminate the house in November 1909. By 1912, this early single-unit compressor was supplying and regulating pressure in gas lines to Moncton and Hillsborough. The steam engine in the foreground has a horizontal piston. The conveyor belt drives a large flywheel in the background, which in turn drives the compressor. This station was located near the site of the newer station, built in 1928. After a one-day delay because of frozen valves in Albert County, gas was turned on in Moncton at noon on December the 20th, 1911. 6.5 hours later, a gas leak in the basement of Elliott's hardware store caused an explosion and fire that destroyed 4 buildings and damaged others on Main Street at the foot of Church. The Mechanic Street fire station, still using horsepower, was just around the corner. The following year, the John Abrams and Sons machine shop on Foundry Street welcomed natural gas. On February the 11th, 1913, a gas leak caused an explosion, demolishing the shop. Like shale gas today, opinions were mixed on the value of natural gas to the city. Some thought it too dangerous, others considered it a valuable asset. This photo and the next appear to be a natural gas installation crew in Hillsborough, having their photo taken for this momentous event in front of what could be Duffy's store. One of the men is holding a pipe wrench and a vintage gas meter sits in front. The man standing on the left in the front row is Roland Steves. His brother Winnett is the third man in the row. Roland is sitting in Winnett's position in this photo. Winnett is standing with his arm bent. Winnett worked briefly for NBGO before a career at the gypsum plant. Roland joined the Army in 1915 and returned to work at the oil fields, running the refinery in the 1940s. While cleaning one of the large gasoline storage tanks in the winter, he fell to the ground, crippling him for life. Pensionable age Moncton residents all have stories of a house demolished by a gas explosion. On April 2nd, 1949, I remember biking to look at this house on Carlisle Street in Moncton, owned by Mr. and Mrs. J.D. Richard. The house blew at 11:35 p.m. on the previous day. The bathtub can be seen on the second floor. Explosion photos, compliments of Jack Christie, historian and former Moncton volunteer firefighter. If an unannounced interruption in gas service occurred, all customers would have to be informed personally so appliances could be turned off before restoring service. This bridge and its successor, built in 1914, carried gas across the river to Moncton. The pipeline on the former Gunningsville Bridge was suspended from the upriver side. This bridge was dismantled in 2006. The external infrastructure attached to a gas well is smaller and more compact than an oil well. A gas well may have a wellhead meter monitoring the pressure, which can be several hundred pounds per square inch, depending on well depth. When gas exits a well, the rapid pressure drop absorbs heat from the atmosphere. Well 98 was located on Route 114 beside the highway. This well was abandoned in 2006. Carrie Steves lived on Scotts Hill bicycled to work at the oil fields, and worked as a jack-of-all-trades from 1911 to 1946. We saw his family standing in front of a derrick in Part 1. Sometime in the 1920s, on the way home from work, he heard leaking gas, stopped to investigate, forgetting about his pipe. The resulting explosion seriously disfigured him for life. He was awarded $300 compensation. Natural gas lamps replaced archaic oil lamps, only to be replaced in turn by Thomas Edison's incandescent electric lamps. Reading the gas meter was one of the new occupations created when natural gas became commonplace. These meters, doubling as a pressure regulator, were typically located in difficult-to-read locations in a basement. Many Hillsborough residents will remember Osmond Steeves, a son of Bessie, as a meter reader. Declining output from wells made it necessary to increase compressor capacity. Left to right, number 1, Fred Bray, carpenter, father of Carrie and Ivan. Second is Carrie Bray, and number 5 in the center, Ivan Bray. Others are unknown. Construction started in 1927 and finished in 1928. Fred and Carrie worked for the company in Moncton. Upon completion, Carrie and Ivan assumed operation of the station. The Bray brothers lived on the site with their families. Concrete foundations are under construction in this photo. A cement mixer sits at the top right in the photo. Water was sourced from a pond with a pump house on the lower left. Water was needed to cool the compressor units. Compressor station construction photos are compliments of Ron Bray, son of Carrie. Ben was the manufacturer's point man, supervising unloading and assembly of the compressor units. In this photo, compressor components are being unloaded at the Hillsborough freight shed. The gypsum company water tower can be seen in the background. This crew is assembling compressors with supervision from Ben. The compressors were manufactured by the Cooper Bessemer Corporation in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and shipped to Hillsborough by rail. Thanks to Dale Bray, Ivan Bray's son, these two photos and others were made available to us. Compressors were especially needed in the winter. 2 units ran continuously. The third unit was a backup, allowing service downtime. An operator had to be in attendance 24 hours a day to maintain security of supply. Gas pressure was sufficient on warm summer days that the compressors were not always needed. Summers allowed time for holidays and maintenance of equipment. This clock is in the possession of Ronald Bray, son of Carrie. Ron, a graduate of their 4-year tool and die course, had a long career with Ford of Canada. His machinist skills have enabled him to keep the clock ticking after 85 years. The clock, by the way, is 2 years older than Ron. This safety trophy was awarded to the Moncton Tramways Electricity and Gas Company Limited employees. This plaque was rescued by Reginald Forbes, who worked for the Moncton Electricity and Gas Company in Moncton. I well remember this Rayglow gas heater, made in Athens, Ohio. It was a source of instant heat on a cold winter morning when inside temperatures could be cold enough to freeze water. The compressor station housed the 3 compressors driven by 2-cylinder natural gas-fueled engines. Vents in the roof allowed air circulation. The exhaust from the engines, which are vented on the side of the structure not visible, created a distinctive sound. Water cooled the compressors and engines, after which the water was returned to the pond. Inside the water tower, under the tank, was a DC generator driven by a natural gas engine. This supplied electricity to the station and houses for lighting. Water from the pond was pumped to the holding tank on the roof of the compressor station. Inside this building was a natural gas supplied Model A Ford engine, later replaced, which powered the pump. When water level in the tank dropped sufficiently, the pump was actuated, filling the tank. Upon exiting the compressor station, the gas line crossed the gully on the trestle to the regulator meter valve house before proceeding to Moncton. Carey went to work for the Tramways Electricity and Gas Company in 1923, driving and repairing streetcars. He and brother Ivan ran the compressor station from 1929 until 1941 for Carey and 1946 for Ivan. He served in the engine room of the minesweeper HMCS Medicine Hat during much of his World War II service. He worked for Swifts in Moncton after the war, before moving to Ontario in 1947 to work for the Canada Starch Company in Cardinal. This house was built about the same time as the compressor station. Carey, his wife Lou, and children Ronald and Joan lived there until 1941. After Carey left to join the Navy, Stuart and Nellie Ross and son Blake took up residence in the house. Ron, about 4 in this photo, and his sister Joan, 2, were children of Carey and Lou Bray. Carnation milk was a staple of the Bray children's diet. It was purchased by the case. Living an isolated life on the station meant fresh milk was not always available. Spouses and children were as involved in life on the station as the men. Ron had a pony which transported him to school in Weldon and back. Ron relates a story of returning home in the winter when the snow was particularly deep. They became stranded in a drift and would have perished if not for Frank Parker happening along, saving them. Ron and Chubby entered the parade even though it was a rainy day. Ron said, after returning from school, my mother always gave Chubby a huge slice of bread and molasses. He loved it. Ivan was about 21 in this photo. Life must have been dull for a single man living in relative isolation in the wilds of Albert County, particularly in the winter. Ivan lived in this bachelor cabin while building more substantial accommodations to provide for his future wife and family. To quote Dale, Ivan's son, "This is the house that my father, Ivan Bray, built when he knew he would work at the compressor station as a married man. He was married to Marion Irving of Hillsborough on October the 5th, 1935. Up until that time, he lived in a bachelor's quarters next to the compressor station." Happy times for the Brays, as Ron sits on his father's lap with his mother and Aunt Helen in the center of this photo, taken July the 27th, 1935, at the annual Moncton Electricity and Gas Company Limited picnic in Casey Cape. This is a picture of Ivan and Marion on their wedding day, standing in front of the Carey Bray home at the compressor station compound. The house was occupied by the Stuart Ross family after Carrie Bray left to serve in the Canadian Navy during World War II. After the fire in 1951, this house was moved to its present site in Weldon, New Brunswick. The reflection of oil well number 20 derrick can be seen in the window of the car. Quoting Dale, "During the spring my father had to leave the car at the warehouse and walk into the compressor station. I can still remember the thump-thump-thump of the compressors increasing in volume as we walked along the road toward home at the station." Carrie Bray also saved this photo, possibly taken at Moncton's Natural Park. Carrie, holding his daughter Joan, and his wife Lou are standing just left of the center post. Dale Bray, son of Ivan and Marion Bray, spent the first 6 years of his life at the compressor station compound. He had one playmate at the site, and that was Blake Ross, son of Stuart and Nellie Ross. Quoting Dale again, "On rainy days, the only place to ride my bike was in the compressor station. As a child, the main memory is the thump-thump-thump of the giant, to a child, compressors." Stuart worked at the compressor station from 1943 until it burned in 1951, when he moved to work for the company in Moncton. The license plate topper is a British-American gas promotion. The boys are using the hood of a car as a toboggan. It was shortly after this that Ivan Bray and family moved to Moncton. Said Dale, "My father left the compressor station and his field work in the Stony Creek oil and gas field to be in charge of natural gas distribution in the city of Moncton in 1946. As a result, I could start grade 1 at the Sunnybray School." The compressor station is on the left, then the garage, workshop, Carrie Bray's house in the background, Ivan Bray's house on the right, trestle, valve, and meter house for Moncton. This radio set was installed about 1947 so that the office of Moncton Electricity and Gas could be easily contacted. Audie, his wife Marion, and children lived on site from 1946 to 1951. They lived in the Ivan Bray house after Ivan and his family moved to Sunnybray. Audie was a brother to Stuart Ross's wife, Nellie. This picture from the Harry Hawks collection records the aftermath of the fire at the compressor station. Everything at the station burned in August 1951 except the Ross home, cause unknown. Blake remembers having to rush home from vacation. Many hasty meetings were held in Moncton about the situation. The eventual remedy was to add propane gas to the system on the Pine Glen Road. The estimated cost of this fire was $100,000. In addition to the compressor building, the fire also consumed the home of the Constantine family, that same house that Ivan built in 1935. All is well according to this gas flow chart, housed in a replacement facility on the Pine Glen Road. In the winter it became increasingly difficult to maintain pressure without the benefit of a compressor. In 1912, natural gas was piped into Hillsborough. My in-laws, the Carlins, use 4 therms of gas at a cost of $2. Osmond Steves may very well have taken this meter reading. Gas, which costs $2 in 1962, would cost $9.40 plus tax in 2012. Many households use gas for cooking, and space heating. This building contained the meter monitoring the gas supply to Hillsborough. After 84 years, this building stands as a testament to the men who built it. This silent sentinel of a bygone era sits at the edge of the gully near the location of the compressor station. Childhood buddies Blake and Dale relive their childhood by visiting familiar sites on the oil field. In their youth, I suspect they had stories to tell that none of their school chums could match. Gas well 32 is on the left. The accompanying tool well for storing tooling when bailing the well is on the right. The small pipe could be a gas line or a drip to drain water from the gas. The only building that survived the August 1951 fire was the house built by Carrie Bray. The house was moved to 2446 Hillsborough Road in Weldon. In the early years, Moncton's access to natural gas gave it a competitive advantage to industry. Unique in the Maritimes, natural gas supply to Moncton ended in 1991 as a result of a dwindling supply and corroded pipes.